Hello everyone, this is PK Entertainment and we're back again, and here now we have another video for you, and this will be a full-on spoiler review for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Now I've already completed a non-spoiler review for the movie and I'll leave a link within the description, but this will be far more of a free-flowing discussion where we go far more in depth as to what happened throughout the film. Now I won't talk about this in chronological order, just go through the particular highlights and what I felt stood out the most. So this is your final warning now. Full on spoilers for Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. If you haven't seen the film, check out now and then come back to this review later on once you have viewed the movie. So we start off then as to one area where I mentioned in my non-spoiler review, and I felt that the film didn't start off very well for the first 10 to 15 minutes. It had this very rushed, hurried feel about it. We began the story with this frantic chase where we saw America Chavez, and I believe it was a Defender Doctor Strange variant, and they were battling this huge monster. We had this encounter where Doctor Strange felt like they were losing, and in order to gain more power he had to absorb the energy from America Chavez. But what happens here is that he gets absorbed by the monster and America Chavez gets tied up and then opens up a portal and then finds her way through. This is very much the scene that we saw, I believe it was the second trailer. So it was a very frantic opening. Again, you wondered what was really going on at this stage. Now the effects were really good during this sequence, and that was really the standard that we saw play out throughout the rest of this film. We then jump forward to Doctor Strange at Christine's wedding, and I can remember when I saw the trailer with scenes of Rachel McAdams, I thought this was going to be some sort of alternate universe, some sort of variant, because we had no mention of Christine in Doctor Strange's subsequent appearances after his first film. I felt they weren't even going to include Christine in this sequel, but when they did, I thought it was just going to be an alternate version. But it turns out that Christine is getting married to someone else. And then we go on to, I thought was a very good sequence, and again this was shown to us in the trailer, where they encounter this kind of octopus-like character in the street. And I liked the way that this sequence played out in the beginning, when we see Doctor Strange leaping out the window and he kind of somersaults into his suit. That's very cool. And I thought the effects were absolutely fantastic during this sequence. And this is when he sees America Chavez emerge in the streets as everybody's running around. And again, what we saw from the trailer when the bus gets thrown and he chops it in half and they eventually disable the creature. And then we had them meeting in the diner afterwards. They had beaten the creature, and this is where we get the exposition as to when America Chavez, where she comes from. And they did explain a bit about Spider-Man. I believe this was the only point that they referenced Spider-Man throughout the film. And if you remember from the events of Spider-Man No Way Home, the identity of Peter Parker has been erased. So now Doctor Strange doesn't know that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. He only knows the entity of Spider-Man. Now, I'm still not sure that quite ties up, and I think they still need to work on how exactly that's going to work with the Marvel Universe and also the Sony Universe going ahead in the future. I was never convinced at how that played out at the end of No Way Home, with everybody forgetting who Peter Parker was, yet he still exists within the Marvel Universe. It never worked out for me. So they still got a bit of work to do in terms of clarifying that situation. But during this conversation, they talk about the Book of Vishanti as being the key MacGuffin, if you look throughout the story. And then Chavez takes them to the body of a zombie, and this was the Defender Strange that got killed in the opening sequence. And of course this zombie body would come to play out later on towards the end of the movie. So I think they were just rushing through the pace here, and we all know that they did cut down the runtime of this film. It stood at around 2 hours overall, where if you look at the recent efforts of Marvel movies, that's actually one of the shortest runtimes. A lot of these movies tend to now be around 2 hours 20 minutes, 2 hours 30 minutes. I think that's just one of the earlier parts that probably was cut out during the explanation and the exposition, because again everything was being thrown at you at such a quick pace. We then go on to what for me was probably the biggest issue throughout this movie, and that was the treatment of Wanda as a character. Now we all know Wanda has been steadily developed since Age of Ultron and Captain America Civil War, Infinity War. She didn't really appear that much in Endgame, but of course she got her own individual standalone story within WandaVision. And what happened at the end of that story, of course, was that she realised that the hex zone that she was living in wasn't reality, and she lost contact, of course, with her sons that she dreamt up within that universe, and that was her way of trying to deal with the trauma of losing Vision. And then she flew away in the end, and then we saw that end credit scene when she was sitting in the house, and we saw the dark astral version of Wanda playing away in the dark rooms of the house. So they continued from that, but my main issue with that is that when we get the scene when Steven talks to Wanda, and it seems like she wants to help, and then she reveals that she knew who America Chavez was, even though Doctor Strange hadn't mentioned, and then she turns the forest into this very red barren wasteland, and it was just a bit jarring because I thought they were going to steadily develop Wanda throughout this film, and maybe she would have become the villain halfway through or 3/4 of the way through the story. But she just becomes the villain straight away. We established that she's been studying the dark hold, as remember we saw at the end of WandaVision, and already she's an out and out villain, and I just felt it undercut the character to an extent. Now, I've seen some other reviews who didn't like the fact that this very much eliminated the whole story behind WandaVision in many ways, because Wanda was trying to cope with the grief and the trauma, and here we see her now just full on villain effect. It almost felt, again as I mentioned before, that some scenes had been taken out, that something had been edited out of this movie. Maybe it was some earlier scene to try and develop Wanda becoming a villain. But I just felt we just needed a bit more scenes, a bit more development, just to really establish Wanda as a character in this individual movie first, before then seeing her go on villain mode. So despite the performance of Elizabeth Olsen, I just think overall Wanda as the villain throughout this film, they didn't quite execute it the way that I wanted it to. And as the story went on, we kept constantly getting reminders of she's doing this because she wants to contact or reconnect with her kids. In the beginning, that was quite a sound motivation, but throughout the movie they kept repeating the same beat, and we had all of these multiple scenes of these flashbacks and dreams where we see them playing on a sofa while she's watching the TV. Now, don't get me wrong, I think Elizabeth Olsen acted superbly throughout the scenes, and I've mentioned in many videos that I do think now Elizabeth Olsen is going to be the next leading lady within the MCU. There's already rumours that they've offered her a multi-picture deal, and even further rumours recently that they've already started development on a solo Scarlet Witch movie, which makes complete sense, and she's been established for many years now within this universe, as I mentioned before. But this was really should have been one of the key elements throughout her development, and they just didn't quite stick the landing, and she even phases out of the story after a while as we concentrate far more on Doctor Strange and Christine, and he goes about resurrecting the zombie version of himself, meeting the Illuminati, which I'll talk about in a minute. And Wanda kind of got sidestepped away, and then when we came back, she had visited that dark temple with Wong, and we had all of the statues worshipping her, and it was really confusing because she was able to transmit another version of herself, the WandaVision that we saw back in the house with the kids, and that was the one that was kind of chasing everybody down. She tracked them down easily, and it's very much of a chase story towards the third act of the movie, where everybody's trying to evade Wanda, and we see those shots, if you remember from the trailer, where she's in the white t-shirt and jeans and she's got blood all over her face. So it was just a bit confusing as to how she was actually doing this. I will say there was one standout sequence when we see the rest of the sorcerers protecting the temple stronghold where Doctor Strange was trained in the first movie, and then we see them coming together here, and we see Wanda emerging from the clouds, and we had some outstanding effects where we see Wanda flying through the sky and she's shooting all of these energy beams as the sorcerers are trying to attack her. She did a similar thing here as what she did within Avengers Age of Ultron, where she managed to tap in mentally to one of the sorcerers, and that kind of broke the chain of the shield that they were using to repel her from, and that's when she went around attacking all of the other sorcerers. So great effects there, and again just tapping into that whole comic book imagination of powers and wizardry and magic that we should be comfortable now in terms of Doctor Strange, which is very much a facet of the character and the whole universe. So all of these scenes were absolutely fantastic. Now the next scene I wanted to talk about is when Strange and Chavez, they get transported to another multiverse by Wanda during the battle at the temple. And this is the stage of the movie where I think it just settled down. It settled down and the pacing eased off, and we had those earlier scenes where Doctor Strange was settling into the multiverse. There was a very funny moment when he thought he wasn't going to throw up, and then he throws up in the bucket, and then they're walking alongside the street and the camera's kind of zooming in and out. We had that fantastic moment before, just to mention, when they're zooming into all the different multiverses, and they do that trick that they did with the first film when they're moving at such a pace and we see them going in various areas. There was one shot that they took from the trailer, if you remember, when they're in that kind of Jurassic world, and it was speculated at the time that many people felt this was maybe an introduction to the X-Men, because we thought it was the Savage Land, but there's no mention of that. There's no real mention of the X-Men throughout this film, and I loved it. It was zooming in and out, and we had one stage where it seemed that they were going through some black and white footage. Then there was another moment when they were going through this paint, there was paint spilling all over them, and there was another sequence where it seemed like they were in some sort of 60s style animated film. And then of course we had the other scene where we see Doctor Strange's face becoming all distorted as what we saw within the trailer. So that was an amazing sequence, and I think they should prolong that, and I think that might have disappointed a lot of people that we didn't get more of the multiverse hopping as what we saw in this particular sequence. But anyway, when they come back to the multiverse, again, it's settled down, and I liked the scene where they go into this memory cubicle, if you like, where they step on a portal and it shows them their past memories. So we had Doctor Strange first, and it referred to a point between him and Christine, and I think they were talking about getting engaged, I think, or going to university, studying a program, and this was when they were much younger, of course. Doctor Strange was clean shaven, and that was a very good moment, and they did that a lot again to establish the relationship between Doctor Strange and Christine. As I mentioned in my non-spoiler review, I felt Christine was far more involved than what I imagined her to be. And I also liked the sequence of Chavez's memories when they were on some other planet and we saw her with her parents, and then she got taken away, or I think this was when her multiverse powers started emerging, because she established in the conversation with Wong and Doctor Strange that she couldn't control this ability of being able to transport through portals. It was something that was very much triggered by her emotions, and they played that all the way through, and I think towards the climax of the film, that was some good development where she was finally able to get hold of her powers in the final fight against Wanda. So that was a good touching moment, and the pace, like I said before, just eased off, and I liked this kind of settling down sequence throughout the film. We then see another scene that we saw within the trailer where we come across the statue of Doctor Strange, and this was in reference to the fact that in this reality Doctor Strange had died battling Thanos, and in this universe he was very much deemed a hero. We then of course got the reappearance of Baron Mordo, who was a variant, and he was deemed the Sorcerer Supreme for this film, and this was a limited performance from Chiwetel Ejiofor. I did wonder actually what happened to Baron Mordo in the current reality that we're in, or the Earth 1 phase, or whatever you want to call it, the original universe, because if you remember at the end of the first Doctor Strange movie, he very much went on the darker path because he was angry at the revelation of the Ancient One tapping into the dark forces. So this motivated him to take out all sorcerers because he felt they were breaking the principles of all the original laws. And we haven't really heard from Mordo ever since the first film. So this was a variant, and in the beginning he greets Strange, but when he takes him to the Sanctorum, I think they drugged them or they hypnotized them, and then that's when they're captured in this kind of prison facility, and this is when we see the alternate version of Christie, and that's when she tells Doctor Strange about their version of Strange defeating Thanos, and she also mentions the fact that their universe was 838 as opposed to our universe that we've been working in being 616. Again, this is just tying into the comic books. And then we come on to the big scene that got everybody talking when the second trailer was released, and that's when we come to the existence of the Illuminati. Now, I'm sure you all know what this is by now, but just in case anybody who doesn't know, the Illuminati was a special group of superheroes who came together to form a secret government group in many ways to oversee the universe and make sure that it could restore itself. Now, I think in the original source material, this Illuminati consisted of Mr. Fantastic, Black Bolt, and it was Professor Xavier as well. So in this lineup, we had the Illuminati consisting of Black Bolt, who was played by Manson Mount, and I believe that was a variant, remember, from the original version where he played in the very much ill-fated Inhumans series. We had the Captain Marvel version played by LaSasha Lynch, who was the Monica Rambeau from the 90s version, and we've seen her daughter appear in the Captain Marvel movie, and she'll also appear in the Miss Marvel's sequel as well. And then we had Hayley Atwell returning as Captain Carter, and she looked fantastic. I mean, to be honest, Hayley Atwell looked fantastic all the time, but she looked great in the costume. And if you remember from the What If episode concerning Captain Carter, everybody was complaining because the rendition of the character looked too butch and she didn't look female enough, but Hayley Atwell looked fantastic. And then we had the other big reveal, which is that we saw that Mr. Fantastic, Reed Richards, and it was played by John Krasinski. And just in case anybody doesn't know, John Krasinski was the actor who I believe starred in both the Quiet Place horror films, and I believe he also starred in the Jack Ryan series that was on Amazon, I believe. I don't know if that's still going or not, but there's been fan speculation for many years now that people want to see him cast as the role as Reed Richards in the eventual Fantastic Four reboot in the MCU, and I've never understood why. Not that he's a bad actor, but he wouldn't be my first choice for this character. And when I saw him in this scene here, it confirmed my feelings, because he just didn't look like Reed Richards. Now, okay, they got him in for a single cameo, so it was just a throwaway thing, nothing special, but he just didn't embody the real kind of sharp and smart savviness that we would associate with Reed Richards, and he didn't really look like him either. I thought the suit was cool in terms of the Fantastic Four costume, very similar to what we saw with the comic books, and it just spruced it up a bit more for this modern day interpretation, but he just didn't scream Reed Richards to me in terms of his physicality or indeed the way that he spoke. So I don't think they're going to cast John Krasinski, because if they were, they wouldn't put him in this throwaway cameo. They would leave that as a reveal later on down the line. So it didn't hurt this movie, but just thinking down the line, I wasn't convinced by Krasinski as Reed Richards. And of course, the biggest cameo that people had already guessed when we saw the second trailer was that of Professor Xavier, the Patrick Stewart, of course, from the Fox X-Men films. Still today, one of the best comic book castings ever. And I thought he looked great in the yellow hover chair. Again, great that they took that from the source material. And also, if you notice, when you watched him as he entered, they played a little theme tune from the classic iconic 1992 animated series. So great to see that homage in to that iconic animated show. Again, I think this is a further sign that we won't be seeing the Fox X-Men included in the eventual reboot from the MCU. I think they're going to go for something different. The next sequences that we had when Wanda, the version that was brought in from the dreamlike version within the house, she was coming through and she was just tearing everything apart, chasing everybody down, and this is when we saw the members of the Illuminati trying to take her out. We had some very good sequences here. Again, I thought Captain Carter looked absolutely fantastic when she was jumping and pirouetting around using her shield. Very good. We did get some brutal moments, I suppose, for the MCU. As I mentioned in my non-spoiler review, there was much speculation by people that there were certain scenes that were very violent and very graphic. I didn't quite see that. In terms of Wanda taking down the Illuminati, so we had the one scene where I believe she impaled Captain Carter with the shield, and you see a little bit of blood, but it was nothing special. And then we took on the Captain Marvel identity, and I think she ended up dropping down a statue on her. Lashana Lynch didn't look right in that costume at all. I don't know why they put her in there, to be honest. We had a bit of a brutal encounter when Black Bolt was going to use his mouth, as that's his ability, and then Wanda wiped away his mouth and then she snapped his neck. Of course, we had a great scene. We saw as Professor X that Xavier was able to tap into the mind of Wanda, and he went to this white background, and then we saw these rocks, and we could see this rubble rather, and we saw that Wanda was trapped underneath and she was reaching out to him, and as he tried to pull her out, we could see the red smoke coming in the background, and that's when the original Wanda came along and snaps his neck. And I also noticed as Professor Xavier was walking to this cave, we saw a TV screen and it had WandaVision, a clip of WandaVision in the bottom there. Again, just building the connection to the fact that this was trying to tie in with that version of Wanda. So that was a very intense moment where we saw Wanda taking out all of the Illuminati. And just to quickly go back to the backstory that was given for this, so in the original story it was meant to be that Doctor Strange in this reality defeated Thanos, but I believe what happened here was that he beat Thanos, but he got consumed by the Darkhold, and as a result of that it resulted in tearing up the whole universe. So when the Illuminati caught up with him, they had to take him out, and again that was a very good scene. We saw Doctor Strange in kind of a different blue costume, and then Black Bolt exhibits his scream, and that's what kills him overall. So I think these cameos, they weren't quite as impactful as what we saw within Spider-Man No Way Home, but they fit in with the story. I think in terms of the multiverse, it was fine with these cameos because you're going to get that. That's the whole point of this multiverse. So I didn't have a problem with it. I've seen some criticisms that some people weren't very happy, that they were far more kind of fleeting cameos. But I think what was going on with the story already, I don't think you could have taken the cameos too far within the story. We then go on to the next stage where I think slightly hurt the film, and this is when Doctor Strange and Christine go and see the darker version of himself when they get phased through in another reality after Wanda has managed to catch them up and she's managed to apprehend America Chavez. Now, they went to another realm here, and initially I liked the scene when he was talking with the darker version of Doctor Strange in the fortress that we saw. And we did get some revelation here about Doctor Strange's past, which I don't believe we've had before, where he refers to the fact that his sister, I believe, had died in a frozen lake and Stephen tried to get her out, but they didn't succeed. Now, this is something I think would have helped if we actually saw that event play out. It would have added even more emotional depths and layers to Doctor Strange as a character, because as I said before, we haven't really referred too much to his past life. Again, this could have been something that was left within the original version and maybe it got cut out in favour of the reshoots, but I would have liked to have seen that sequence actually play out. And then they changed something again from the trailers. We saw the line from the darker version where he says things could get out of hand, but they changed it here as they were battling, and we saw that Doctor Strange gets the third eye on his forehead. Again, I don't know if that's reference to the comics in many ways, but it changed that dynamic. And then we saw a very inventive sequence when they're using each other's powers against one another, but they're using musical notes, because there's pianos and violins within this citadel, and we see the musical notes playing as they're fighting one another. And this is something I credited the movie so much, because they were really being creative and imaginative in exhibiting all of the ways that Doctor Strange uses his powers. But this is when it kind of got messy, because obviously Doctor Strange was in a different multiverse here. So their whole plan was that they were going to use the Book of Vishanti. I believe they've attained the Vishanti book at this stage. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I think they were going to use this to revive the zombie body that they buried earlier on within the film, and then use that zombie body, I think it was called Dead Walking, but it was a bit confusing and they went a bit overboard in terms of the effects. And we saw that the zombie version was revived, and then we see him going up to the mountain and transforming, and we're seeing all of these dark spirits coming out of him, and then we're mixing that with all of these dark spirits coming out of Doctor Strange. And this is where I suppose the Sam Raimi tone was coming to more fruition. People will point to the Evil Dead moments, but I think it was overcut. They should have streamlined it a bit more. I think it would have just helped the movie if Doctor Strange had just found his way back somehow through some sort of portal, and then he could have worked together in the final battle against Wanda. I think that would have been the more better way to do it, rather than doing this whole zombie version. So then we go to nearing the climax now, and this is when the zombie, I believe, is getting defeated by Wanda, and this is when America Chavez asks him to use her power in order to try and defeat Wanda. And this is again going back to the opening scene throughout the film. Doctor Strange realizes that no, you've always got the power inside you. You can use the power yourself to take her down. And when I saw this scene, I could already hear the complaints from everybody talking about how this is yet another example of the female character superseding the male character, where the male character admits to her that he's not good enough and that the female is stronger than him. And we've gone through this narrative so many times, so that triggers a lot of people. And I thought, well, here we go again, this is going to be another example where we hear all of the narratives regarding the MCU, etc, etc, but it doesn't work out to be. Chavez uses the powers is that she opens the portal, and then we go back to evil Wanda looking at the more good-natured Wanda, and they're back in the house again, and she looks at the kids, and that's when she kneels down and cries again. We saw this scene in the second trailer, I believe, and this is very much Wanda realising the error of her ways. She'd gone too far, and this is when essentially she stops all of her chaos and she agrees to contain the dark hold and make sure that nobody else can obtain it. And this is when she collapses within the temple. So again, it was just a bit of an easy win in many sense, and this refers back to what I was saying, that they didn't quite utilise enough, I think, the full villainry and evil nature within Wanda. But it does pose questions as to what will happen with Wanda next, because this was in an other reality, right? So if indeed they're going to do what I think they're going to do and give Wanda her own solo film, how is she exactly going to transport into reality? And that's it in terms of this story then, where we come to the end and we see Chavez training with the other sorcerers in a temple. This is good because now you've established Chavez within this universe. She's going to continue training. I'm not sure she'll appear in the third Doctor Strange movie, but I'm sure she'll make further appearances maybe in the Disney Plus shows. We then come on to the overall ending, which was very strange. We see Doctor Strange at the end mending his watch, and then he's walking outside, and then all of a sudden he has some sort of panic attack or a major headache, and then we see the third eye appear again at the top of his forehead. So initially I thought, has there been some sort of transference between the evil Doctor Strange that we saw prior, and has that personality somehow infused themselves into this Doctor Strange, and will we see a further darker influence take over itself? So it was a really strange way to end. It just ended kind of abruptly, and then we went to the end credits. I don't really like it when movies do that. I prefer far more of a consummate and complete ending overall. So then we talk about the end credits, and of course we got two. In the first scene, we see Doctor Strange walking in the street, and then this woman appears, and then she opens up a portal, and then she says something along the lines of, there's been a further disruption that you've caused from these actions, and then we've got to go back and sort it out. Are you ready? And I believe Doctor Strange says, I am ready, and we see the third eye appearing from his forehead, and then they go into the portal. Now, of course, the big surprise of this scene was that it was Charlize Theron in this great sorcerer makeup, and Charlize Theron just looks like, well, she's Charlize Theron, she looks amazing as always. Now, the key here is that I do believe, I don't think it's been confirmed yet, but it's quite obvious that she will be playing the role of a character known as Clea. Now, for anybody who doesn't know, I think Clea is a sorceress from the darker dimension, and she's actually also the niece of Dormammu, who we saw from the first film. And if you notice, when she opens up the portal, it looks like the same background as what we saw with Dormammu. Now, what's key here is that if we follow this character from the comic books, there was a major storyline involving the death of Doctor Strange, and Clea goes on to take over the mantle and become the new female Doctor Strange. So once again, this is going to trigger all of the arguments that this is yet again a further formation of the MCU, because we're going to see the female character take over the male character again. So I'm sure we're going to have all of those debates online. But no doubt about it, Charlize Theron looked absolutely great in this outfit, and it just seems such an obvious choice. If you want to get a commanding character to play a female sorceress, then you just get Charlize Theron. We would assume we're going to get a third film, as I mentioned before, so if we do get a third film, then Charlize Theron very much looks like she's going to be the next key supporting character alongside Benedict Cumberbatch. So a major coup for Marvel, getting someone like Charlize Theron. And the second scene was just a nothing joke where it referred to an early part of the movie where Doctor Strange and Chavez are walking through the market stall, I believe, or it's a burger joint, and Bruce Campbell comes up to Doctor Strange. I can't remember, he's having a go at him for some reason, and Doctor Strange puts some sort of spell on him where he pours mustard over his face and he starts punching himself, and it's a 3-week spell, so he keeps punching himself for 3 weeks, and then we come to the end credit scene, he finally stops punching himself, and that's when he says it's over. And now, of course, Bruce Campbell, a lot of film fans know, of course, as playing Ash from The Evil Dead, which was directed by Sam Raimi, of course. So that's just a quick kind of reference to that overall association between the actor and the raptor, nothing more. So that was it really in terms of the real major spoilers throughout this film. But I think overall this is a very good entry for Doctor Strange, and I'm sure it's going to make massive at the box office. As usual, I will provide commentary on the first box office weekend. I think early predictions are going anywhere from 150 to 200 million. It's not going to quite catch the 260 million that we saw from Spider-Man No Way Home, but I think it's definitely going to be one of the biggest, if not the biggest openings throughout this year. It's definitely going to beat the Batman, and I think it's going to get anywhere from at least, I would say, 850 to 1 billion worldwide. It's definitely going to be, I think, the biggest superhero movie throughout 2022 for sure. So that's it really in terms of my full spoiler review of Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If there's anything I've missed in terms of Easter eggs or certain names or references that I've missed out, certain comic book material that I've misreferred, then let me know within the comments, and indeed we'll have a further discussion. As I said before, I'll provide commentary on the box office success, and of course further coverage of more MCU Phase 4 content. So I believe the next one up is now Miss Marvel television show. I believe that's in June, and then we do have Thor Love and Thunder coming, I think, at the end of June or July, as well as Black Panther Wakanda Forever as well. So lots of Marvel content to cover on the show as well, and other superhero content as well. I don't just cover Marvel content, I cover other shows as well. So let me know in the comments if there are any other television shows that you'd like to see me review, or any other movies that you'd like to see me review as well in the future. So that's it really, spoiler review. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please also hit and like those subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.